As we've taken the first steps in our Daring to Hope journey, we've already discovered together some of the key characteristics which define lament as a form of prayer, which transitions us from pain to God's promises, from heartbreak to God's hope. We have seen how the children of God, including God's own Son Jesus, use lament in the darkest moments of their lives to cry out honestly, candidly, urgently, and boldly to God for help. And together we have begun to see how learning to lament provides Christians with an often neglected, ancient and biblical pathway that not only vitally enables us to process and cope with our heartache and suffering, but also moves us towards the help and hope of Jesus. But how can we learn to lament in our lives, especially if this language and practice doesn't come naturally to us? Is there a pattern or a structure or a framework or a formula we can use that takes our unbearable suffering, heartache, pain and fears and gives them a shape and a voice before God? The answer, if we delve deeply into the Bible, and particularly the Psalms, is a resounding yes. Let's read Psalm 13 together and see if you can identify the 4 steps: turning to God, permission to protest and complain, boldly crying out help, and daring to trust and hope in God that the psalmist adopts. Altogether, these 4 steps combine to make the simple lament formula we will explore and learn together throughout Daring to Hope. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. My enemy will say, I have overcome him, and my foes will rejoice when I fall. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. Can you identify the 4 steps? We can see the first step of turning to God in verse 1 and again in verse 3, when David invokes the Lord and Lord my God. It is God, his God, the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful maker and sustainer of all things, that David comes before in prayer. It is this same God who is our Heavenly Father that we come before with our laments too. The first 2 verses of Psalm 13 offer us a glimpse into the second step, as in anguish David protests angrily before God over God's apparent absence and the triumph of his enemies. Notice how David does this with a series of complaints, each marked by the 4-time repeated refrain, how long, how long, how long, how long. In verses 3 to 4, we see the third step in our lament formula as David continues to boldly cry out to God, asking him for his divine help and deliverance from his overwhelming circumstances. And then, pivoting on the but at the beginning of verse 5, the psalm concludes in the final 2 verses by reaching the 4th and final step in our formula, the ultimate destination of all our laments, a daring decision to not only hope and trust in God, but also worship him with rejoicing and song. It is a beautiful and powerful ending to a heart-wrenchingly honest psalm. Whilst we will unpack each of these stages in greater detail in the sessions to follow, it's important for us to note here that these 4 steps, turning to God, permission to protest and complain, boldly crying out help, and daring to trust and hope in God, might not always be so neat, tidy and sequential in our futures beyond Daring to Hope. And that's okay. Both life and prayer are by no means tidy. Like the laments seen in Psalms 22 and 69, at times we might follow a more wandering path when we lament and pray, straying into each step more than once and often out of order. On occasions, we may even find ourselves like the author in Psalm 88 and never even make it to the final step. Yet whatever our situations and circumstances will look like, this 4-fold formula that we are beginning to discover and will experience for ourselves in the coming sessions will always remain as an excellent and essential structure and starting point for talking to God about our suffering, heartache, pain and fears as we move toward the hope of God's unfailing love, his goodness and salvation.